Welcome back, team. It's week 4, so we're going to have a look at some carbohydrates. Let's begin. So team, you should have filled out your sheets from last week. You should know a little bit more about your protein intake and some of the proteins you like and some of the proteins you don't like. You should know about the 5 things the closest people would say about you. You should know about the 5 whys of your goal. And you should know about your good, better, best. So team, this is everyone's favorite week. It's carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are quite tricky and they're also quite in-depth. So we're going to dive into the science, and then I'm going to give you some really basic things to think about to help you understand how carbs are going to work in your body. Carbs help with adenosine triphosphate, with ATP, which is our main power source for muscle movement and for enzyme use. So when muscles slide between each other with power stroking in our main form of movement, it uses ATP to help contract and loosen our muscle function. So true is there's enzymes within you that need active transport to perform activity. Now, what does that mean? It means that your little enzymes that sit outside the cell or inside the blood or wherever they be, if they're active, it means they're probably electrically charged or they have a fuel source where they might need to go and grab something and bring it across the cell membrane. To do that, since it's fighting a medium or fighting the flow of your body, it needs power to be able to do that. Kind of like a boat going against the tide. So carbs fuel those little reactions. So they're incredibly important in our body. So important, in fact, that we store them as extra fat on us just in case we need them in a pinch. Carbs are also incredibly good at holding in water. Their chemical composition is very similar to that of H2O. Because of that, carbohydrates will hold about 4 milliliters of water per gram that you eat. So they're very good at helping us store water within our bodies. Because of the storage of water, this is why it's quite common to see people lose drastic amounts of weight very quickly at the beginning of diets, but not so much at the end and middle parts of their diets. Quite commonly in traditional dieting settings, they ask you to reduce your carbohydrate intake. And when that happens, you don't store as much water. So you'll get clients come up to you quite regularly, or people you know say, oh, I lost 10 kilos in 4 weeks. You can do that too. And then when you look at it, they've actually just moved from perhaps a standard eating practice into ketogenesis or into soups only or into carnivore diet that are usually more carbohydrate low. So they're actually just holding less water. They haven't necessarily lost any fats. They're just not retaining as much water in their body as they traditionally would. Now, that's not to say that's a good or a bad thing. It's just to give you context of why that might happen. So just like how our proteins are broken down into amino acids, we find that carbs or carbohydrates can sit into different categories. So carbs sit in 3 spaces: starches, sugars, and fibers. So a starch is something like a potato. So if I was to cut this potato open and run my thumb along the cut line, you'll find that the material itself is very, very starchy. Carbohydrates like potatoes are very dense, very starchy. When I digest this and eat this, it's quite heavy in my stomach, so it keeps me fuller for longer. It's a good source of energy. It's a slow burning carbohydrate to devour. This may spike my energy levels and hold me at a high energy level for a long period of time. However, it will sit quite heavily in the stomach. So a starchy carb, like a potato, might be really good for a weight loss client because it will keep them fuller for longer. However, it might not be very appropriate for someone who's trying to put on a lot of muscle mass, because people who want to put on a lot of muscle mass may need to eat lots of foods instead of dense, starchy foods. You will find a lot of vegetables to be starchy carbohydrates. Sugars are another form of carbohydrate. Now, you might find those in true forms like honey. You might find those in things like cupcakes. You might find those in things like fruits. So sugars are a very, very fast digesting carbohydrate in your body. They're fantastic at getting into the blood quickly and spiking your blood levels. However, historically, as they spike quickly up, they too true come down quite quickly. So it's a nice sharp bell curve. And what that looks like, and you've probably experienced it yourself, is you see kids have these big sugar rushes and these massive crashes because they're getting spiked very highly in their blood and then they start crashing as quickly back down. So they are not long-lasting energy sources, but they're good for a quick hit. So you might see these quite frequently in people who are doing long-distance endurance racing, because since their sugar levels are dropping so quickly and they're burning so many carbohydrates, they need to have quick hits of sugar. You might see in bodybuilders who have a huge amount of calories to ingest who might rely more on the heavy sugared items. Commonly seen are for people who don't have much of an appetite, might lean more towards their fruits than they would their vegetables because the sugars will dissolve quicker and it leaves you feeling less full. And finally is your fibers team. So vegetables do come under your fibers. This is something we're going to talk a little bit more about next week because I really want to deep dive with you with fibers, with vegetables, but they sit in their own little category where they're not particularly calorie dense, but they're very nutritionally rich. What does that mean? It means that they give you lots of nutrients, but they don't necessarily provide you with lots of energy. So think of something like asparagus or cauliflower or carrots. They give you lots and lots of fiber, which is fantastic for your gut biome and for your movements, but they're not particularly good at giving you long-lasting energy. Unbelievably good for weight loss because they're very filling and they provide a lot of micronutrients, but not particularly good for muscle gain or size gain because there's not a whole lot of calories within them. So we talked a little bit about how carbohydrates spike our blood, but I want to give you a more visual representation of what that looks like. There's a thing that you may have heard called your GI or your glycemic index. All that refers to is how quickly does ingesting a carbohydrate spike the sugars in your blood. Now, the true test is they tested this against pure sugar. They gave them the most amount of spike and then a crash. And it might look something like this. So very, very quick burst of energy, but a very, very quick sugar crash as well, where their blood levels drop down quickly. Simple sugars, things like honeys and true pure sugar, things that are simpler, will do this to your blood. Think things like cookies, stuff that there's not a whole lot in there that's beyond sugars and wheats. Now, when we look at something more dense, like a starchy potato, it might not boost your glycemic index anywhere near as high, but you might get a lot longer lasting effect of fullness and of energy. So a potato will not have the same glycemic index as a spoonful of honey. The honey will hit your blood a lot quicker, but the potato will last a lot longer. So you might be asking, why is this relevant? Why do I need to know about glycemic indexes? Why do I need to know about starchy, sugary, or fibrous carbohydrates? Well, to give you context, we're going to try to make the best decision around carbs, our good, better, best, based off a 4-quadrant that I really like. Now, some foods you're going to run into are incredibly nutritionally rich. What does that mean? It means it's got a lot of fiber, it's got a lot of micronutrients, and it's got a lot of health benefits to you beyond just its macronutrient. You might think, for example, an apple that has a lot of nutritional benefits into it, more than just the energy. You will run into things that are nutritionally quite poor. Now, that could be something like a cookie, or it could be a candy bar. There's not much in it that's not just energy. Now, that's really good for athletes and for people who are training a lot who might need to replace their energy, but they're not getting the same kind of nutritional benefits out of it. On the other side of the 4-quadrant, we have things that are calorie rich and things that are calorie poor. So something that's very calorie rich could also be a Mars bar. A Mars bar, again, lots and lots of calories. When you look at something like broccoli or something like an apple, it won't be quite as calorie rich as a Mars bar. When we're thinking about our good, better, best, and we're thinking about our carbohydrates, they will all sit within this 4-quadrant. So for example, this muffin will be quite calorie rich, but won't be particularly nutritional. So it sits across the membrane like this. It's calorie rich, but nutritionally poor. Okay, so a treat, something I might have intermittently, not all the time, but very good if I wanted to put on weight. Now, something like a potato is very calorie rich, but nutritionally rich also because it's a starchy vegetable. I get a lot of benefits from this vegetable and carbohydrate. It will sit in this space. I might grab something like a celery stick that is both nutritionally rich but also calorie poor, so probably really good for when I want to lose weight. We can use this 4 quadrants to help us identify what is the carbohydrate doing in my body. If I'm trying to lose weight, I will choose things that are calorie poor, but ideally nutritionally rich. If I'm trying to gain weight, I might choose things that are more sitting in the calorie rich space. Ideally calorie rich and nutritionally rich, like vegetables and fruits. If I was looking for a snack, most of my snacks that are baked goods are probably going to sit more in the calorie-rich but nutritionally poor space. So we just grab whatever it is we're trying to dissect and we can put it inside this full quadrant. It just helps us make good, better, best decisions if we have more context. It's okay if you feel that this is a little bit complicated. It's not for everyone, but if you can get your head around where your food sits inside the quadrants, you'll have a lot easier time understanding what it's doing to your body. Something I'm going to get you to do this week with this sheet is you're going to write down your 10 favorite foods in the spaces provided, and I want you to figure out if they're calorie rich, nutritionally rich, calorie poor, or nutritionally poor, or a combination of the four. We're going to have a little think of a metaphor of how carbs work inside our body. So if protein is like a bucket with a hole in it, with the water constantly leaking out, I want you to think of carbohydrates as a cleaner at a hotel. At the beginning of the cleaner's day, they get all the towels out of the storeroom and walk their trolley down the main strip next to all the rooms. Now, if there's a door open in that hallway, the cleaner will take a towel off the rack and walk it into the room, closing the door behind them to remind them that they have put a towel in there. They will go down the hallway, putting towels in every room that has an open door. If they get to the end of the hallway and all the doors are shut, but there are still towels left on their trolley, they'll take the towels and put them in storage for later. If we are eating a surplus of carbohydrates, we always store them for later because they are so valuable at making energy. If the cleaner gets to the end of the hallway and there are doors open still, but there are no towels on the rack, they will go to the storage container and bring towels out. So that represents you in a calorie deficit where you're not eating quite enough calories to the amount of activity you're doing. So our body starts eating away at the residual fats that sit on us and uses it as energy. So a simple terminology that's around that concept is calories in versus calories out. If I have more calories within me than I have burnt, I will store them as fat. If I don't have enough calories in me for the amount of energy I've burnt, I will eat away at the extra fat on me. So team, there's one more thing we're gonna have a look at this week, and that's your most disturbing habit. So your most disturbing habit is the thing that's in your way the most. So that might be that on the way home, there's a McDonald's just before your house, and it's hard to resist the desire to drive in there after a hard day. That might be that every Friday night you go over to your folks' house and they cook a very beautiful but very calorie dense lasagna that's holding you back from your weight loss goals. That could be that you eat out most lunches and you're finding that it's hard to keep track of your calories. It doesn't matter what it is. You'll know what the thing that's getting in your way the most. You could be going to bed too late and it's making you too tired in the morning to prep for your day properly for your nutrition. Whatever your specific most disturbing or disruptive habit is, I want you to write it down on your sheet this week. Okay? It's really important that we understand what it is so we can make plans to try to address it. So for example, if you're finding that the McDonald's on the way home is too much of a distraction for you, you can take an alternate route. If you're finding that you're not meal prepping enough and you're getting caught without lunches, it might be worth scheduling in a meal prep day. There's 100 ways to skin a cat, as the saying goes, and it's all about finding what's going to work best for you. Excellent team, that's the end of week 4. Up in your emails, you will have a sheet that will tell you your good, better, best for potential carbohydrates you might like. Very useful tool to have on your fridge, team. You will print out, or if you can, get the digital copy of your list of calorie rich and nutritionally poor. You will be sent exactly the amount of carbohydrates that you are to have this week, and I'd ask you to balance them between starchy, simple sugars and fibers. If you're a client who needs to lose weight, rely more on the denser carbohydrates to keep you fuller for longer. And if you're a client who's trying to gain weight, try to rely on the short, simple carbohydrates that will burn quickly within you so you can be eating more. Excellent team. Carbohydrates are a little bit complicated, so well done to getting to the end of the video. The more you learn about them, the easier it will become and the easier it will be to make your nutritional decisions. I'll see you next week.